All right, my English teacher friends, so I present to you another video where I'm going to include a voice lesson. So I think a lot of you are getting familiar with my work and know that I do intensive word study academies with my students and nuance academies. And basically, it's just these little, mini units, mini exercises, or whole full-blown units that I do with my students to teach the basics like grammar, punctuation, and syntax. But the big one that I really focus on is their actual voice. And a lot of teachers think I'm, absolutely crazy for thinking that voice can be taught. And I just firmly believe that it can. So for in this particular video, I'm going to show you one exercise that I do that incorporates classic bedtime stories from the perspective of that AP voice dream team that we were talking about the other day. So in this one, I'm going to basically rewrite where the wild things are from the narrative point of view of Chris Stevens from Northern Exposure, and I'll get to that in just a second. So for those that don't know, and this is your first viewing of my work, the other day I went for a run and I had a strange idea right before AP scores were released to us. And I'm running, and all of a sudden I had this idea, and I said, of all the TV characters I've ever encountered, who among them would get, just like crush a 6 on every single AP essay, Lang and Lit. So like who has that voice that we want to cultivate and like hope to inherit when we get a brand new group of students in the fall. And I posted it in the Facebook groups, even my Facebook group, Teachers Making Better Writers. And we had a wild compilation of characters, and some that kind of stood out are in the speech bubble here. So a lot of people like the voice of Ralph, the adult narrator Ralph from A Christmas Story, and I do as well. Like if I could get a student to rock that casual vernacular colloquial with the tier 2 academic diction and teeter-totter balance that out in their writing, holy cow, would we have a phenomenal writer. Rory from Gilmore Girls, David from Schitt's Creek, Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City, Niles Crane, and one of my personal favorites as a child of the 90s, I loved Northern Exposure. I think that's probably my most favorite show of all time. And really like Chris Stevens, the radio show host, and I'm going to feature his voice in this exercise. So we kind of call it the AP Dream Team, the voice masters, and there's several other characters on here, that we could add on here, like notably Walter White from Breaking Bad is one such character that I think could absolutely crush the AP exam. So all it is, voice, is that balancing of the academic tier 2, the colloquial, and the vernacular. And I find when I do intensive word studies, I have to disabuse some of my students of the following notion. They say to themselves or think to themselves, the more million, gazillion, bazillion dollar words that I use in my writing, the better my writing. And it's like, no, 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 no. Good writing is not, the obscene presence of, tier 2 level words. That's not the gist. You really have to stay in your wheelhouse and balance out that colloquial, the vernacular, and the academic. And that takes time. And you'll find that when you really immerse your students in a word study academy, you'll see things like this. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years. Students will invent words. Students will misuse words. Students gravitate towards words that, we as adults and we as English teachers and writers, we kind of cringe. I notice this in my word study academy. In one of my lists, I have the words plethora and cornucopia. And for whatever reasons, like those two words velcro themselves to students, and they want to say cornucopia and plethora in every single essay that they write. And I'm like, no, we don't. No, we don't use those words in that context. So it takes a lot of teaching, a lot of modeling, and a ton of practice to get that voice balanced out correctly. And this is just one exercise that helps students along the way. So as an example, I give my students a lot of mentor excerpts from the likes of Ralph from A Christmas Story. So I remember when he gets that bar of soap crammed into his mouth for his foul language, he said this. This is the type of voice that I want to really hone and harvest in my students. So listen to this excerpt here. Over the years, I got to be quite a connoisseur of soap. Though my personal preference was for Lux, I found that Palmolive had a nice piquant after-dinner flavor, heavy, but with a touch of mellow smoothness. That blend of tier 2, like words like connoisseur and piquant, right, mixed with that colloquial and vernacular, then fused in with the sentence complexity, the manipulation of the syntax. Holy goodness, like that is the pizzazz, that's the wow. When we read that type of writing from our students, I don't know, personally for me, I smile ear to ear and say, yup, this kid's got it, that elusive it factor. And I really think it can be taught and practiced and developed over time. So a lot of the stuff that I do in these exercises are rooted in Write It Right by Strunk and White. It's you can get this for free on archive.org. It's a PDF, and it's basically an adapted celebration of the elements of style, which is where I learned as a student all the basics about grammar, punctuation, syntax. But in Write It Right, Strunk and White have something that they call rule number 18, and this is a staple of my Nuance Academy, in which they espouse the theory that there's 12 different ways to construct a sentence. So my students know all their parts of speech and the names of those 12 sentence constructs. So, for example, my students would be able to refer to adjective clauses, parenthetical statements, short, simple declaratives, things of that nature. So the kids that give me an iota of effort and attention can riddle off the names of those sentences. It's geeky, it's complex, it's theoretical, it's technical, it's cumbersome to teach, but it's real good foundational literacies to create a classroom of writers. And I find that once students have general mastery of those basic concepts, then we can go for pizzazz, then we can go for the wow factor. So here's another example that I share with my students from the Wonder Years. I was a huge fan of this show in the 80s and 90s. Kevin Arnold, the adult voice of Kevin Arnold. So this I share with my students as another example of what we're striving for. Again, note the voice, the colloquial, the vernacular, the tier 2 academic, but also look at the sentence structures in this and the manipulation of the syntax. Once upon a time, life was simple, evolutionarily speaking. Then things began to change. The competition got tougher. There were winners and losers. The struggle continued. Then in the fall of 1970, a new creature appeared, the likes of which had never been seen before. Noble, upright, virtuous, ninth grade man, master of all he surveyed, which in this case was Woody's Pizza Barn, where the elite went to meet. Yep, by the last week of summer, I was feeling pretty good about myself. So here's something that, teachers ask me a lot. They say, Christian, you're a published poet, and you write textbooks, you write poetry. How much do you fuse creative writing instruction with expository composition instruction? And I do a bit of it. So our students, especially in AP Ling and AP Lit, are analyzing rhetoric and literature. So in order to understand a writer's moves, I think it's imperative that they become writers themselves and have opportunities to manipulate the theory and the technique and the devices and the choices of the writers that they are analyzing. It's really good to have an opportunity to emulate. So these voice lessons are, in a sense, a creative exercise. And some teachers have said there's no room for creative writing in AP Lang and AP Lit. And I'm like, I disagree. I disagree with that. So it really helps with their analysis, their ability to analyze when they can get into the minutia of creation. So here's one last one, and this is Chris Stevens, the voice that I'm going to try to emulate as I rewrite Where the Wild Things Are. There's a dark side to each and every human soul. We wish we were Obi-Wan Kenobi, and for the most part we are. But there's a little Darth Vader in all of us. Thing is, this ain't no either or proposition. We're talking about dialects, the good and the bad merging into us. You can run, but you can't hide. My experience, face the darkness, stare it down, own it. As Brother Nietzsche said, being human is a complicated gig. So give that old dark night of the soul a hug, howl the eternal yes. I love that teeter-totter balance here. Ain't no either or proposition. You know, like what makes this powerful is the ain't no either or teeter-totter balance with that heavy tier 2 of proposition, dialects, Nietzsche, right? The short, simple declarative sentence, you know, the 3-word sentence, the 2-word sentence, followed by that long, flowy sentence. Great voice rhythm flow exercise on this. You know, this is the ultimate aha for our students, you know, to get to this level of complexity. So let me talk about the exercise that I'm going to do for this particular video. So here are the assignment guidelines. I have brought into class a whole bevy of bedtime stories, children's stories, and our high school library actually has a number of these for our English language learners. Do a lot with bedtime and children's stories, so we have a good number of carts that we can assemble. So we go down to the library and we visit what I bring in, and I have my students choose any bedtime story and narrate it from the voice of a Hollywood Dream Team member or original coffee shop hipster. So let me explain what I mean by that. We talk about the Carrie Bradshaws, the Rory Gilmores, the Chris Stevens, and make a huge list on my easel pad of characters that contain the voice that I'm hoping to instill in my students. And I have them choose the one that they're most familiar with. So like a few years ago, everybody wanted it to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I'm not familiar with that show at all, but there was a character in there that a lot of my students were trying to emulate. And for those students who say, I don't watch TV, I don't know any of these characters, then I say, just pretend like, you know, you're the guy who is in the coffee house ordering the latte, the sophisticated latte with the complicated milk substitutes and, you know, the quality of froth that you want, you know? So be like the original coffee house hipster. And they get that. It's just modeling. So ultimately, we got to balance the academic, the colloquial, and the vernacular and follow the exemplars. And as always, I give this caveat when I work with teachers. You got to Bob Ross your instruction. And here's what I mean by this. In order for students to pull off this exercise, I think it's vital that the teacher position themselves as the expert writer in the classroom and give a couple of exemplars and models. So for mine, I'm going to rewrite Where the Wild Things Are and really give them a point A, point B to point C sort of roadmap as to how to execute this. And what I discovered in writing it myself were kind of the snafus issues and pitfalls of the assignments. And I think that's the glory of Bob Rossing your instruction. Get to the easel, get to the canvas, and paint with your students, right? It really helps them out a lot, demystifies the process, and I think it allows, teachers to become better, composition instructors when they do this. So here's what I'm doing. Where the Wild Things Are, as told by Chris Stevens, Northern Exposure, right? The radio show host. What we did was this. We took each illustration of where the wild things are and simply removed the words from the book. And I look at the picture and I narrate the picture. My goal is up my vocabulary, right? So keep it in tier 2 level. I want to sound academic, but I don't want to be pretentious. I don't want to be contrived. I don't want to sound like a goon. So teeter-totter balance the academic with the vernacular and colloquial, manipulate my sentence constructs, manipulate my syntactical features, and go for the voice rhythm flow. So I'm trying to transcend the rubric and not write a 6, but I want to write like a 1,000,000. I want to crush it. I want to go through the glass ceiling on this. So I got the pictures from archive.org. So a lot of these children's stories are on there, and I just cut and pasted them into this Canva presentation, and that's what my students are going to do for their revisions as well. Just use Canva and cut and paste the images from the books, or they can snapshot the images with their phones and upload them. So they're pretty tech savvy and can figure it out. So let me show you my revision here. Where the Wild Things Are, retold, a retelling, a re-recitation from Chris Stevens of Northern Exposure. So, good morning, citizens of Sicily. Let me tell of the ghoulish night Max wore his wolf suit and vicariously made mischief of one kind and another. His mother, sparse of patience for a snot-nosed bratty kid and his wanton tomfoolery, called him Wild Thing, and Max, embodying the primordial soul of canis lupus, quite in character chided, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without anything to eat. Right, so I've read this book so many times to my kids that I could quote it, and I tell my students, so if you need to work in like the most seminal quotes of the book, just write them down and fuse them in. So note the complexity of the sentence here. His mother, comma, sparse of patience for a snot-nosed bratty kid and his wanton tomfoolery, comma, called him Wild Thing. And Max, comma, right? So really wield the sentences here. I want to see my students manipulate hyphens, commas, colons, semicolons, and really bust out their chops syntactically. So I'm just going picture by picture here. Note my vocab. Words like primordial mixed with snot-nosed bratty kid, wanton tomfoolery, sparse of patience, right? Blend it all. Colloquial, vernacular, academic tier 2. That very night in Max's room a forest grew and grew and grew until his ceiling hung a wild profusion of interlacing canopy with vines as menacing as the serpent who bedeviled the likes of Eve with false compare, and the walls became the world all around. And so, not giving an iota of concern to the victuals his mother presumably burnt anyway, Max set sail on the mighty seas through a single night and a single day in search of that elusive it that panged around the interior walls of his restless soul. Right? So Chris Stevens was, big Walt Whitman fan, and I did my dissertation on Whitman. So I can write like this and explain that to the kids that, they're probably not going to write like me. Like maybe the best kids in the class can, but keep in mind, Bob Ross never dumbed it down. So don't dumb it down for your kids. Like give them something good to look at, and they'll approximate it, right? They'll elevate the bar of expectation. And in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And as if lassoing the horizon into his eager embrace, He came to the place where the wild things are, and stoically mused at their empty gnashings and gnarly eyes, in orthodontia all askew and in need of minty freshness. Right? So keep the vocab up, but don't be stuffed suit about it, right? Yeah, I don't want to sound like a Princeton professor in a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, smoking a Sherlock Holmes pipes with pince nez, right? So keep it in my wheelhouse. So blend, teeter totter, alternate, oscillate between those vocabs. Till Max made a myriad of magical hand gesticulations and said, "Be still," and subdued them with an unwavering and unblinking stare. And sensing that he could seize dominion and appoint himself king of the kingdom, he said, "Let the wild rompus start." So, like, that's one of the key quotes of the book. So, with that, I gave the direction, fuse in your key quotes and kind of build your narrative around those key quotes. But look at this. Words like myriad, gesticulations, subdued, unwavering, unblinking, dominion, appoint. But it's teeter-totter balanced with the colloquial and the vernacular. You really don't want to do one so much more at the expense of the other. Otherwise, the voice goes out of kilter. So it's really important that they I don't know any other way to say it than to say teeter-totter balance it, right? Whoever would have expected to see that the face of gaiety and the face of ferocity were one and the same? Together, Max and his comrades howled at the moon and untethered all the strings that kept their souls tied to things such as rules, order, and decorum. They hung from the low-hanging limbs of mighty trees and vowed that they'd never let anyone or anything control them, as if they were marionettes governed by the actions of another. Max, King of Kings, rode on the shoulders of giants, and each day was a celebration of his eternal gift to hold precious the gift of endless tomfoolery and shenanigans. The wild things adored their leader, and they were happy with bellies full of merriment and boyish wonder. But then, all of a sudden, Max's better knowing felt the pangs of guilt and nostalgia for his former life. From the horizon of a place he could not forget, he smelled something sumptuous. Surely his mother's doing. And again, I'm going, through this quick, I'm just reading it. But note the sentence complexities, note the voice rhythm flow, all that blend of the tier 2, the academic, the colloquial, the vernacular, right? And I'm just looking at a picture and telling the story. Farewells and goodbyes can bring sorrow, but Max, despite the gnashed teeth roars and mangled claws extended to reel him back in, set sail for home. He sailed back over a year and months and weeks and days, and into the night where a spaghetti supper awaited him with a slice of cake to top it all off. Right, so that's my rendition of where the wild things are through the voice, through the perspective of Chris Stevens of Northern Exposure. So students can choose from a myriad of books. They go giddy over this and end up choosing some of their favorites that they were read as a child, and a lot of these are online too, so it's very easy to get the pictures. So that's one little activity that I do with my students to teach voice. It does not take very long. It's not a cumbersome project. It's joyful. It's a lot of fun. And I see that it translates over into their essay writing, their expository writing quite well after you do it a few times. A bit of modeling, a little practice goes a long way. So on Tuesday, July 12th, we're going to offer the Nuance Academy, where we're going to go over how to instill and really ensure that students have the basics of grammar, punctuation, syntax, voice rhythm flow, mastery of rule number 18 in my summer short course series that's called the Nuance Academy. It's a 90-minute intensive where we're going to go over this, and teachers that enroll will have access to all my PowerPoints, my text, my handouts, etc., and we'll build upon the Word Study Academy that we did last week. Also in the summer short course series, we're going to do AP Strategies for Success, where we'll focus on how my templates can be used to construct each FRQ. We're talking lang and lit uniformly. So a template for the introductions and then a template for the body paragraphs can be used to write all 6 FRQs. It's pretty wonderful how those templates demystify the writing process. We're going to get into alternative grading methods towards the tail end of July, and in the beginning of August we're going to do Plato's Plato discussion. So I'm going to do a session and a seminar on that. And then a couple of things to wrap up here. A number of folks are inquiring about the Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. And I've said, Christian, why aren't you running that this summer? Because I got good news. We're running it through the National Writing Project as of August 9th. So we're currently, at the time of recording this video, cobbling things together, and we're anticipating an August 9th launch date. So a couple of pieces of good news. It's less expensive for the National Writing Project to run it. They have, I don't know, more funding and more people, more staff to run it. I'm a solo operation, and there's a lot of back-end expenses on my end that the National Writing Project can eat, and we can offer it for a lesser fee. So there'll be information on my webpage, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com, about that. I'm hoping to get that webpage updated with the National Writing Project information in the next coming day, and then in the next few days. So stay tuned. You can email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com for these slides if you want them. And then lastly, one last fire we have in the fire is, as many of you know, Tim Freitas, the wonderful Garden of English guy, and Brandon Abden and myself will be presenting at the NCTE conference this coming fall in Anaheim, California. So many irons in the fire, busy, busy, busy. So hope all is well, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Happy teaching and happy writing.